All right, let's now bring in Bob Bianchi. He's a criminal defense attorney and a former prosecutor. Look, Bob, it's a very litigious society that we're in, and certainly this has created a flood of lawsuits, as we've just discussed. Firstly, with all of these lawsuits coming in, are the majority of courts even operational now in the US? How are these cases being presented and adjudicated at the moment?
We're having, Michelle, a horrible time right now with the court system completely shut down. As a trial attorney, we've been trying to move our cases along, civil cases, our criminal cases. They're doing a lot with Zoom and trying to do as best they can. But you have to understand the court system a lot of times relies on witnesses and trials where we can't have groups of
Right.
people, obviously, in the courthouse. So it's really put us to a standstill.
Yeah, I would imagine the same applies to a whole host of other legal matters that will just get pushed out till when the courts can resume operations as usual. Look, I want to focus a little bit on what we're hearing from contract lawyers and insurance lawyers because we've got a number of lawsuits, and many contracts, in fact, include provisions for a so-called force majeure. Now, that could either work in favor of either party, depending how that contract is written, Bob. But can we now safely classify this coronavirus pandemic as a force majeure, an uncontrollable force of nature, as you will? Or would a contract need to spell out pandemic specifically under the force majeure clause?
Yes, under the force majeure clause of most contracts, pandemics are not, at least that's the argument the insurance companies are making, part of that this pandemic is outside the protections. I believe, Michelle, very deeply as a trial attorney and as a consultant for businesses, that there is going to be a legislative fix to this in Congress in some way, shape, or form, so that these companies, small businesses as well as companies, can take advantage that this pandemic is, in fact, a force of nature that was
Right.
unanticipated and should, in fact, be covered.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, as you say, that is, even if it's not specifically written pandemic under force majeure clause, it certainly is an uncontrollable act, and that is a subject to some legal debate. But you say you think that there's going to be some kind of overreaching statement about that, perhaps from the Supreme Court. I mean, how does an issue like that get resolved ultimately, whether or not the coronavirus outbreak is a force majeure?
Okay, well, there's two ways that happens. The first is going to be the traditional legal way, where they're going to bring lawsuits and they're going to say that the insurance company should cover because it is a force majeure. And that's going to work its way for years, probably through the judicial system. But my hunch is that Congress is going to do an end run here and try to expand the insurance companies some way through some laws that are going to provide some coverage for these businesses in order for that not to have to be litigated and these businesses wait for years until the Supreme Court makes an ultimate decision. But it is a problematic issue that
Yeah.
I believe Congress should step in and try to provide at least supplemental coverage or work with the insurance company so it can be, quote unquote, considered a force majeure situation.
Yeah, sounds reasonable. Bob, regarding businesses, we have the people under lockdown. Businesses have been forced to shut down. A lot of businesses are saying, look, this wasn't my decision. This was mandated by the state or by the government. Do businesses have a constitutional right to challenge this? Is there some kind of constitutional claim against something like that?
Yeah, well, the beautiful thing about the American judicial system is that you can always sue the government under 42 USC 1983, and you can say our civil rights under that statute have been violated, and the government should not have taken them away. However, in a situation like this, the government is given extraordinary powers to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. So the issue is going to become, did the government have a compelling interest? The answer to that, in my mind, is going to be yes. And did they narrowly tailor what they did in order to protect the community? And if, in fact, they did, which I suppose in many instances is going to be found to be true, then the government's going to be very difficult to sue them. Because, look, each state is doing things differently. But on the whole, they understand that for the protection of the community, they need to have people distant. They need to shut these businesses down. Most states have done it, which in my mind is going to be the argument that the government's going to use to say what we did was reasonable under the circumstances.
All right, very quickly, I want to get your thoughts on the idea of gun shops being essential businesses, that closing them would infringe upon a Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. Where do you stand on that constitutionally?
That's perfect. A perfect example, Michelle, of what we just talked about a minute ago. So it is enshrined in the Second Amendment. The issue, like in New Jersey, where I'm from, they shut them down. But then the governor turned around and said, wait a minute, so long as you practice social distancing, it can be considered an essential service because there could be some sort of mayhem that occurs with regard to this pandemic that's going on. So we're going to open them back up so long as they're practicing, if you will, safe distancing. And that's a perfect balancing act that the government did here in New Jersey to allow the Second Amendment to be protected, but by
Right.
the same token, protecting the community.
Bob, thank you so much for that breakdown. Bob Bianchi, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor. Appreciate it.